much for joining as we take just a few minutes to review the data from the most recent unit assessment. What I've given you is a copy of the Unit 2 assessment as well as the item analysis. So what we'll do is we're going to focus on the questions that for this assessment were multiple choice. So let's take a minute. Has everyone seen this item analysis before from Tyler ISD?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So what I would like to start with is let's look at percent correct. I know that in the district analysis, they're looking at anything below 65 as a concern. Definitely we want to look below 65, but if we see anything that's in that, I would say low 70, let's just go ahead and take a look at it so we can see if there are patterns. So as we work our way down, what are some questions that we need to focus on today?
We need to focus on question 7, question 8, and question 14 for sure.
For sure. Okay. I agree. I wouldn't mind looking at 11 and 12 as well, because they're a little low. And then we can go from there. 61 isn't great. We're looking at number 9. 61 is still a little low. So if we have time, but I say let's start with the lowest first. Does that work?
It works.
Okay. So let's start by looking at, let's start with not number 7, sorry, look, we don't have the answers. That's not a multiple choice. Sorry. Oh, and neither is number 8. Okay, just kidding, y'all. Yeah, 8's the essay. So let's start by looking at, let's do a practice one together for my purposes to make sure we're all on the same page. Look at number 2 real quick. 72 is great, but let's take a look. If the correct answer was D, what do we see the patterns are within the other answer choices? Is there anything we see there that is concerning? Just looking at your item analysis, do we see anything concerning, anything that jumps out to us about question 2? Just your item analysis.
I think it sometimes is a good idea on those kinds of questions where you have 18, it looks like 18%, is I'm assuming.
Percent.
Okay, 18% answered B, he has no interest in his schoolwork. And I think it's important to remind kids that that may feel good as an answer because you're not interested in the schoolwork and you're connecting with the text on that level.
Yes.
But that's not your answer.
Yes. And that's really what we're trying to key in on here. So 72% got it right, which is great. That when we see 72% getting it right, we're like, okay, we're moving in the right direction. I think you hit the nail on the head in the sense of clearly there's another answer choice that is really pulling their attention. It's not spread across the remaining 3 choices. It is B for some reason really drew them in. So us looking at why did B draw them in? So looking at the question, it says he shivered from the thoughts and fidgeted with the inkwell cover, sliding it backwards and forwards mechanically. And it's talking about inferencing. What inference could be made? Why do we think they picked B, that 18%?
I know a lot of my kids get fidgety when they're bored and disinterested, so they're automatically putting themselves in that character's spot, and they're like, I fidget when I'm not interested, so therefore maybe the character is it.
I would agree completely. They see the word fidgeted, they make a personal connection, so text to self, and they think that's what it is. So how do we, moving forward, what are some things that we could do to try to like debunk? Like I heard what you said, you know, how do we make sure moving forward that we want them making text to self connections, but they're not taking that out of context and getting the wrong answer?
I would have them check it with the rest of the story.
Yeah.
Like if you make a text to self connection, you think you have a particular answer, make sure it checks with the rest of the story. Even though they're asking you to assess a particular detail, look at it with the rest of it just to make sure that it still works.
Well, and I think also that entire paragraph is about him being in school. Even if it wasn't text to self, because I don't know that all of mine made that connection. But the whole paragraph is about school. And I mean, there's that little spot where it says the nest sodden with in black with wetness and the egg cold as a cave stone. They didn't read that. They read the entire rest of the paragraph. Like, talking about a whole bunch of school.
Yep.
So I think they didn't read it in reference to, they didn't actually read the story. So therefore, they just went to
They
that
skimmed.
paragraph.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to talk to them a lot about not skimming, cause you miss the important details, and, annotating, obviously, and some things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think on certain questions, you know, pulling them and putting them up on, the board and saying, okay, if you got this answer, this was the answer, if you got this answer, you know, what do you think you were thinking, and get them to do a little bit of a self-assessment and make sure that you draw attention to those types of questions, so that, you know, they're learning, oh, I
Some
can't do
reflection.
that.
For sure. Okay, great, that's exactly what we're going for there. So looking at, let's see, looking at number nine, we had 61% chose the correct answer, which was A. Do we see any patterns in their other answer choices? So let's go to number 9. I do, yeah.
Okay.
It is right, I think right there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So it looks like we have a pretty substantial split between B and C. So I guess my curiosity would be,
It's not close reading.
what would our students be, what would make them choose B or C? So look at number 9. What is the correct way to write sentence 4 using parallelism?
I just don't think they knew what they were doing.
Okay, so,
I think they don't, okay, so looking at why they didn't answer D, they don't answer, we've had to talk about,
right,
they don't wanna answer correct as is, they just don't. So fortunately, it wasn't correct as is, so, they didn't answer that. So the fact that the ones who knew it answered A, and then there's an even split between B and C, people were just guessing at that point, I think, because there's too close.
I think what is interesting, so what I love about this item analysis is we've got our campus, but then we have the district. And if you look across at how the district did as a whole, so all of our English 1 kiddos, we see some very similar patterns, which I find quite interesting. It sometimes makes me wonder, where is the gap in learning, and is it questioning? So how are we working on this specific skill in our classrooms, so that then maybe we're not guessing? Like, what are we, in class, what are we doing to focus in on this specific skill?
Well, I know we had a parallelism
Worksheet.
worksheet lesson thing that they went over, and did that, we did it in groups, they did it, you know, separately. And then looking at it from there in multiple choice sample questions,
Okay.
so that they would be prepared for that.
So, do you all feel like how they performed in class on that activity is similar to how they're performing here? Or here they were like, over their head?
They thought it was confusing in class too.
Yeah.
I think they just haven't, I know with mine, they just felt like they hadn't seen that parallelism before. And so, you know, it's fairly easy to teach, it's just getting them a lot of practice so that they can identify it when they see it and go, oh, I know what that is.
Yeah.
Because parallelism can be in a lot of different ways.
Right.
This one is, predicate adjectives, and so it can be in a lot of different ways, be infinitive, number of things. They kind of have to see it in a lot of different ways, feel comfortable with the rhythm.
So I guess my wondering then would be, and anyone else feel free to speak up, how can we spiral this back in, our everyday learning across, you know, between now and when we do get to EOCs, so that we make sure that more than 61% of kiddos are understanding parallelism better.
Maybe have them look for it, just in the readings that we're already supposed to be doing, have them look for those things in the text, like, hey, is it there? And then like maybe we go through ahead of time and look for them, just so when people point out, hey, look at it, there it is.
Sure.
So kind of like, especially because I have some kids that are real low, like when we did the H&H thing, I had a kid test that BR 45 to like 100 something. So he's super low, but making sure that like, hey, look here, kind of like knowing where to kind of guide them, so that it's a little easier for them to be able to do this kind of thing on a test.
Okay.
Cause bless his little heart, he is also LP.
Yeah, and we're gonna have that. I think that's something that we as ninth grade teachers especially struggle with because we have kiddos who, unfortunately, they can't stay in the younger grades forever, and we've gotta move forward. And so this is their first encounter with very rigorous, learning opportunities. And so in EOC, they really take a step up when they get to high school. And so, yeah, the reading is far more difficult than what they're capable of, so. All right, let's take a look at number 11. Let's take a look at number 11. Very specifically, we'll go 11 and then 14, because these actually are from the same peak. So I'm curious, both were a little low, but 14 is substantially lower. So let's start with 11 and see. Punctuation. What's the most effective way to punctuate sentence 10 to show two closely related ideas? So I can definitely see, Jill, the lowest number of students shows D, most effective as is, because you guys tell them that's rarely the answer, so that makes sense as to why they're not choosing that. So anyone who's willing to jump out on the ledge, what do you
Okay.
think?
I'll jump out.
I know it, I know you will.
Sorry.
That's okay.
I'll jump out on the ledge. So, the answer was C. Okay, so then we're split right there on A and B. Here's the problem, and I don't think I'm wrong about this, but y'all correct me if I am. A and B are correctly written. So they're correctly written grammatically. I tossed my backpack on the couch when I got home and sat down as a sentence. My thoughts consume me as a sentence. B, I tossed my backpack on the couch is a sentence. When I got home and sat down, my thoughts consume me is a sentence. Now, I think it needed a comma after sat down, but they, whatever. So here's the problem. You've got 3 grammatically correct answers.
Yes.
And so in the most effective way that we have got to talk to kids about effective, because when you use, I tell my kids, when you see the word effective, there's more than one correct answer. And so you're looking for, or when you see the best way, they're telling you there's more than one correct answer. And so this is not only what is you've got more than one correct answer, but also what is the best way to punctuate it to show 2 closely related ideas. Now in our grammar bell ringers on run-on sentences, they actually use the phrase 2 closely related ideas.
Okay.
And in joining the sentence. So C is, it really comes down to where is the best place. You use a semicolon to join 2 closely related ideas instead of breaking it up into 2 complete sentences. That knocks A out. So then you've got B and C, so the question is, where does the semicolon go to most effectively join the 2 closely related ideas? Actually a very complicated question
Very
for a
complicated.
freshman.
Yes, yes. And that is truly, and I think we're seeing that same thing, we'll see when we get to 14 in a minute as well, but how then do we ensure that all of us, this team of English 1 teachers, are teaching it to the degree that we're going to be able to answer this most effective question? So we're using bell ringers. So talk to me, we do bell ringers, this grammar piece, and we whole group review, okay? Is it loop back in anywhere else in our learning opportunities for kids?
And it's scaffolded.
Okay.
So like, before they ever get to this, sadly, they have to understand what makes a sentence.
Correct.
So we have to start there, so that's something we're always doing. And then it is spiraled back in, like with our short constructive responses, and requiring them to use a semicolon effectively in a short constructive response or an essay. Or when we get there, I haven't gotten there yet, y'all may have, on argumentative text, where you can use, like with a compound sentence. So when you're usually not doing this in isolation, you're doing
Right.
it not only compound but complex. So you can create a rebuttal situation with a complex sentence, like although some people think this, comma, and that's, but, so we spiral it in when we're working with the writing, and then looking at different stories and things. Hey, look at that sentence, what do you know about that? Same thing with parallelism.
Yep.
Like Savannah said, just when we're reading
Every time
something,
there's an opportunity.
hey, we just talked about parallelism, look at this sentence, or what do you know about this sentence? That kind of thing.
I'm constantly circling back to it. Hey, remember this?
Sure.
Great,
Yeah.
look at your notes.
Yeah.
Spectacular.
Do you feel like, the way students, conversate is negatively impacting their ability to do things like this? It's like their everyday language and how they string their thoughts together.
Yeah.
Even their texting and everything, how they
Yeah.
can't, like, text in complete sentences.
Like I gave them a quiz today, and I had a question where 3 were correct and 1 was incorrect, and all they had to do was find the one that was wrong. And it was very obvious, because it was something, like I haven't seen him since, but like the way that it was punctuated was very much how they talk, which was grammatically incorrect, so they were all like, they're all right, it's like, they do not.
Yeah.
And I struggle with it in that I don't wanna tell them that the way that they talk to each other is wrong, so I'm always trying to be very careful about how I tell them, like, hey, like in standard academic English, we're not gonna write it like that. Like talking is very different, cause that's more informal. When you're in like formal academic language, we're not gonna use things like finna and fix and to. That's slang.
Gonna, wanna, kinda.
Yeah.
Gonna, G-U-N-N-A, kinda, K-I, and what did you just say, fixin'?
Fix and to,
Yeah.
ain't,
Yeah.
finna, what's another one? On God appeared at some point in a test, and I was like, whoa.
Have to,
On
have
God.
to's an
Yeah,
acronym.
I was like, for real.
Have to, H-A-F-T-A,
Yeah.
have to.
So you're telling them, how else could we, I'm gonna stretch thinking, what else could we do to address that, other than saying, we're not gonna write the way you speak?
Yeah.
Well,
What else
giving them
do we
some practice, giving
Yeah.
them, you know,
Opportunity.
letting them correct their own short constructed responses where they've written kinda, and you're like, okay, now we're gonna do this again, or peer editing some things.
Yes, exactly. I have done that too, where I give them like a journal opener, like thematically related to what we're about to read or we're currently reading. And it's kind of like, how do you feel about this? Like it's more personal and like reflective. And then I have them go through, hey, here's contractions, we're gonna fix those. If you have these things, look for those too. Read your responses out loud. Because more often than not, if you read it to them, they're like, I didn't write that. I'm like, I'm just literally reading what's on the paper.
Yes.
I don't understand. You did write this. This is you, right?
And you could even put like those sentences like, I don't know, in a paragraph or something, and do it as a class, like how can we fix that?
Yeah, I've done that
Together
too.
as a class.
I've done that too. Like, how can we improve this? How can we make it better? And then what are things that they did well? Like, I'll have them do that too. And I always tell them, like, you can pick out ways to help each other that I might not be able to, like, oh, hey, it's like this from when we did it in this time, cause they learn best from each other sometimes, so, it's nice, it's a good
I
time.
like how you said, we're looking for ways to improve, not you're wrong, I appreciate that, that's good.
And when you look at question, 13, I believe it is, which was the text where they wrote in,
Oh,
that was the verb tense question. And kinda going off of what Savannah said, they could fix that by saying, it said, in the future, I study. And they had to fix it by saying, in the future, I will study. Simple fix.
Sure.
But then you have people who, these kids are so used to, I think, the text messaging and stuff that they shorten everything. So I had several, I'm sure y'all did too, that said, I'll study, like I apostrophe I apostrophe LL, which is fixing it. That's I will study. If you put that apostrophe in there. But I had several ill study.
Ill study.
And-
Ooh, what a teachable moment.
Yeah, and so they, when they see that, they're like, I didn't get credit, how did I not get credit for this? Well, why don't you, tell me why you
Yeah,
didn't
what does
get,
it say?
why didn't you, it says, what does it say? It says ill study, it doesn't say I. And so, it's that kind of thing that is a newer battle on top of all the other battles,
Right,
so.
no, thank you for that. I couldn't see what the response was for that question, so that makes sense.
And we did 70, I mean, it's not like we did terrible on that, but I
No.
think that would have been a lot higher if we hadn't had some stupid mistakes, which
Yeah.
not so stupid.
And I'm sure the kids who did that were like, oh, man,
Right,
cause they
right.
meant,
But they
I
have to
will.
see that to know not to do that again.
Correct, correct,
You have to show that too.
yeah, for sure.
Like, I tell my kids all the time, I'm like, hey, you have 0 text evidence in here, do you know what that's gonna get you? Not anything.
Yeah, 0.
And they're like, what?
Nothing.
But I wrote so much, I'm like, yeah, you did, and it's really good, but there's no text evidence in there, you need to make sure that you are following the directions and not making silly mistakes, so you don't get 0s.
Yeah.
So, I think just teaching them to slow down and be careful, cause some of these questions, it's like there may be like a couple words off for each answer, and if you've got a kid who's like, oh my god, I'm not gonna finish, oh my god, I'm not gonna finish, oh my god, I'm not gonna finish, and they're just breezing through, it's like, just slow down.
Right, well, and even as, in preparing for today, the passage is quite long, it's quite lengthy, so for some of our struggling readers, I could see where, like you mentioned, they're skimming, and then finding out, the question says go to paragraph, and they're going there and they're not getting the full understanding of what they're reading. Number 14 is the same teak, and again, like we talked about, we scored quite low here, 18%. So let's take a look at number 14. What's the correct way to punctuate sentence 20, to introduce a quotation? I'm not gonna lie, when I first, looked over this, I went to 46 and marked it like, yay, okay, 46 got it right, and I was like, oh wait, no, I looked at that incorrectly. So I guess my wondering, let's look at 14, 46% of the children picked C. Why do we think they picked C?
It looks like a comma.
Looks like a comma.
It's the more familiar of the 3 punctuations there.
There.
It's the most familiar to them.
So they feel like surely that's it. I've seen that before.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I would be picky about this. To me, A and B are correct. A is just, there's more time between the offering of the reassurance statement. There's like, wait for it.
That's like
That's
a longer
okay.
pause.
As opposed to stop, here it is. That's okay. And I had difficulty explaining that to the kids because it's a nuance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cause I have that too,
Yeah,
sometimes it's like,
it's a
well,
nuance.
technically it's right, but it's not technically right either.
Well, and sometimes we see, and that's part of, when we look at these item analysis, is it something we're doing that we can improve on teaching wise, right? Is it the way the question's worded, or is it is it poorly worded? So like you said, A is really right, it's not wrong. And there's nothing that really makes A better than B or B better than A.
I do wish we had, more, I don't wanna use maybe the word vetted, but a little better vetted questions sometimes on our district assessments. I know Ms. Rivera and I have the benefit of having, AP, College Board for the pre-AP kids, and they do these checkpoints. And the checkpoints are actually, I don't wanna say easier, but they are a little bit more fair
Yeah.
than,
As a kid,
than
that's-
some of these from HMH. HMH is really, and I think that's where these come from. HMH is this, okay? But even the texts are better. I know we just gave a checkpoint and my kids were talking about, those were the best 2 stories that I've read on a test. And it's like, yeah, they are. And so we talked, Ms. Rivera and I talked this morning about, pulling the, current checkpoint essay, with the poem, because the poem is really good, and really easy to understand. And they've got an analytical prompt after it, and I think we're gonna make a copy of all that and bootleg that out to everybody. And bootleg that out to sorry. Bootleg that out to everybody, which I think
It'll
is
be
okay
fine, yeah.
anyway.
Yeah.
Because it's just a really better question. Some of this HMH stuff is pretty complex.
And like
You
the
know.
texts are so long. Like, it's so frustrating for me as a teacher to watch them and know that they know the answer, but because the text is so long and so not interesting to them, like I understand in like the logical part of my brain that they're not going to have very entertaining readings on a state test, but to assess the skill, they could at least like make it shorter.
Yeah.
Especially for some of my like super low kids where it's like, I have to read this test to them, some of them, and it's hard to get through the whole reading, like, wait a minute, how long is this? And then they're skipping anyway.
Yeah.
Like even my smartest kids miss stuff because they just didn't want to sit through and read all of it.
Sure. Well, and yes, I don't disagree in the sense of, when I read this, I was like, this story, whoa, just not interesting at all. And I like to read.
Yeah.
So no, I totally get it. One I think we missed that I had marked that we were gonna look at was number 6. So let's pop back and look at 6, and then we'll kind of wrap up with some final thoughts. Number 6 is looking at
Read lines.
analyzing how the author's diction and syntax contribute to the mood, voice, tone of a text. So let's look at number 6. Oh, maybe I can get to it.
I think if number 6 had confusing as an answer choice, they all would have picked that.
Agreed.
So,
It was a confusing point. And it's funny because in preparing for today with both English 1 and 2, the English 2 point is so easy to understand. And so then when I was reading this one, I was like, what? Like that is very confusing for 14-year-olds. I don't disagree with you at all. So our first feedback would be, have a better point, got it.
Readings.
Yeah.
To be more accessible.
And all the language that you have to have understanding of to appreciate the contrast in the lofty praise and the criticism in parentheses, like Lance-like. Well, you've gotta be able to equate that to, Arthurian legend and
Yeah.
that kind of stuff.
Well, I know they put that in here, like to tell them what it is, but do you feel like they use
No.
those?
No.
And they
Never.
I could put it on a flashing neon sign and they wouldn't.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
because
then-
it's over
and
here,
then
it tells
like
them, but.
noble and gaily and.
Yeah, my My kids are gonna see gay and start
Oh,
giggling.
rapture of a winged soul.
Mine went to, when we had some conversations that I read to, they were like heavenly is where they
Because
were,
they were-
which is why they
I'd
were
be
pulling
there.
joyful and peaceful.
Right, for sure,
Yeah.
hearing rapture, yeah, absolutely.
But, I mean,
That's
oh,
all.
yeah.
Yeah.
God life?
Spirit.
Spirit.
Spirit is on there.
Soul, spirit,
So,
rapture.
and I get that those may be distractor answers,
Uh-huh.
but they worked.
Yeah, clearly.
Yeah, they did their job.
Clearly, it's like,
Culturally, we're
Yeah.
here.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's interesting. Like, this is just like a personal thought, like where I grew up, people aren't super religious, so nobody I know would have read it that way, but it's interesting to hear that a lot of your kids were
Oh,
like, the
absolutely.
Bible. And
Yep.
it's just a culture thing too, I think that's
And
really
they had
interesting.
they had to look up some of the words, like in their little dictionary thing.
Mhm.
They're like, oh yeah, this is talking about
Jesus.
what it's and genderous, yeah,
Yeah.
and Jesus, like, oh, it's God, genderous.
Not the face.
No,
So
So
the
I just think
answer
it's
was A.
the answer's
brave.
A, brave. And I mean, I see why the answer's brave, but I absolutely see why we have kids who are choosing the other things, because if they're not gonna go back and look at those little footnotes of what landslide means and things, they probably, it flew right over their head.
And I think it's important when we get closer to the test, and I know we all, this is something we all do. But even on like the EOC testers coming up, retesters coming up, the fine print, you know, when they give you a title and they write little stuff underneath it, you know, remind them to read all of that. Stage directions, if it's drama, anything in the brackets, sometimes they'll just skip over. And so, it's just in addressing how we improve on these, is just making sure they read all the fine print.
And that's really what I was gonna ask, moving forward from today, how do you take this kind of information and grow in your lesson planning and how you're approaching these things with students, so that we can help them be better prepared moving forward? Yeah. Okay.
I mean, every time we have a reading and I see a little footnote, I'm like, oh, what is that? They're like, a footnote. I'm like, okay, where are we going?
Yeah. Sometimes those little choral responses work great, cause
It's
then
great,
your kids who are not paying attention are like, wait.
I felt a little bit like a primary school teacher because I started like tapping my feet on the ground. I'm like, what is it? And then one of my kids started tapping his feet. He goes, oh my God, it's a footnote. I went, ho ho, because your feet are at the bottom of your body. There you go.
Nothing wrong with primary teachers.
No.
I'm teasing.
No, I'm being
I know, I
serious.
agree.
I did feel a little bit like, I was like, oh, this is so much fun. No, not really.
Okay. So what I would like to start with is, taking a couple minutes to look at just the item analysis. Has everyone seen this type of printout that we use, in Tyler SD? Okay, perfect.
I think so.
One day, maybe in the future, we can team up and really dig into, the new item types, cause that's really what I'd like to do, but there's not a whole lot of feedback from the item analysis on item types. So we're just gonna focus today on the multiple choice questions. Taking just a couple minutes to look at the breakdown of how our students did, just like before we even dig into the test. Let's look at just the item analysis, how we did compared to the district, if we see any, similarities, any patterns, and then we can jump into question types. So I would say, just like with the district, we can focus on anything below 65. So what questions, just looking at below 65, do we need to focus on that are multiple choice?
Number 4,
Mm-hmm.
5.
4 is not a multiple choice, but yes, if
4
5
isn't?
for sure. Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
5,
Uh-huh.
6, I'm sorry, 7.
7,
8's a response.
yeah, 8's a response.
11,
Yes, ma'am.
12,
Yes.
Yep.
And
14 was a response.
14's a response. 60's still a little low, so if we, have a couple extra minutes and wanna dig into number 13, we can as well. Alright, so let's start with number 5. 47% of the students answered correctly and answered A. So really, even before we get into the question, let's focus in on, just real quick, 47% chose the correct answer. Do we see any kind of, without even looking at the question, any kind of pattern within the other answer choices? Anything that we're like, what happened there?
Yeah, 32% answered D or whatever.
Yeah, 32% answered D. So if we can, in a minute, when we dig into the question, get to the bottom of why D was a trick answer for them, that might give us something that we can then use as we're moving forward working on this concept, right? And what I found interesting, look over at how the whole district did. So this would be us and Tyler High combined. You see a very similar pattern. So clearly it's not just our kiddos that are struggling with whatever the concept is in this question being tricked. So let's go ahead and look at number 5.
First of all, it says figurative,
Okay,
and
so
they are
5
very
is
literal.
about figurative language.
To me, they think very literal a lot of
Yeah.
times, is the problem,
Okay.
but maybe not.
No, I agree with you completely. So figurative language was also what jumped out at me even as I was preparing for today. Which they describes how the figurative language of the sentence helps the reader
Setting.
comprehend the setting. Yep,
So,
okay. So knowing that the right answer is, it emphasizes the contrast between the size of the waves and the size of the boat. Looking down at answer choice D,
That's not even logical.
It doesn't even make sense to me why they chose D.
yeah,
Yes, it is.
smaller than a standard bathtub.
The
Okay.
boat
Meant
can't-
to
it's
have
not
a
smaller
bathtub
than a
larger.
bathtub.
There you go, that's what it is. I didn't finish the question.
Right, they're reading too fast.
I would put it,
That the boat would be smaller than a bathtub.
I can't take this.
well, because it says,
Not with how many people were on there, no.
Yes, they quit reading. That's
many a
the
man
problem.
ought to have a bathtub larger than the boat,
Or
is
they
what it
didn't,
says in
yeah,
the
or they didn't even read it, they're skimming.
skimming.
Oh,
A lot
that's
of
the
them skimming, they don't wanna
problem.
read it. I mean, we've talked about that, they admit it
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
Or they didn't read the passage. If you don't, like, this is, cause, like, I'm thinking to myself, A is not the answer, but it's because if you, it's out of context, right?
Yeah.
That it, because it makes a, feel like that's like an odd response, like it doesn't make sense,
Yeah.
but if you didn't read the passage.
Man, awesome.
You know, you gotta go back to paragraph
Yeah,
2.
it's on
Yeah,
that
so
there.
Mhm,
Maybe,
mhm.
And the poem and the story were hard to these kids.
this was very
It was too-
abstract.
It was too much.
Yeah, cause
Abstract.
HMH is hard.
They could
They're
not
doing too much.
concrete much, there's so much symbolism, it was very
So I would
hard.
agree, lots of symbolism. I will tell you, because as I prepared for today, both English 1, English 2, I actually enjoyed these.
These weren't bad.
These were actually enjoyable,
Hard for
but they
them to
were harder
grasp.
to grasp.
Right.
I would agree. Whereas with the English 1, I was like, these suck. Like, this is a terrible story in form. These are enjoyable,
Yeah.
but the symbolism,
But they
was-
couldn't
they
understand
couldn't
it.
understand it.
Mhm.
Yeah. So how would we address this discrepancy within our teaching moving forward? What are some things that we could do, some learning opportunities we could provide to students so that we don't,
Well, aren't most of the passages though now supposed to be more modern? They're supposed to be taken from those things that I just showed Joy, that genre breakdown of different things. They're
Yeah,
not
they're gonna
gonna,
be cross-curricular.
right, but I mean, it's not gonna necessarily come from something that, this open boat, this is
Classical
old.
Well, this
literature.
is a testing skill opportunity, like this is
Right.
a,
Teach a
right,
skill.
so we're teaching them, what are we teaching them about taking the test? We're teaching them to slow down and read the entire story. So I would probably have them talk about this one out loud, because someone's gonna say, it's definitely D, and then they can explain why, and you can say, it's D if you take it out of context because you didn't consider the settings, you didn't finish the
Didn't read
question.
Mm-hmm.
Or it doesn't make sense outside of all of the surroundings. So this is a test taking skill. It's really not even a standard skill. You know what I mean? So that's what I would do.
and I look at this, the way test taking skills are a great, and I know you guys are working on small group, but those types of things for me, when I was a teacher, was a great small group when you're with me activity. Because some of your kids who aren't gonna pay attention and start to kind of zone out, they're missing that when we're whole grouping
Yeah.
that kind of information. And it doesn't have to be, it can be quick, like quick snippets of small group rotation with the teacher, so that you're making sure they're hearing that. Yeah, for sure, okay? Let's look at number 7, cause I had like a eek moment when I saw number 7. 25% got the answer right, which was B. What are we seeing about those answer choices that's a little scary?
Dictionary is just,
Uh,
using a box or
60%
definition.
pick the same answer, so I'm curious, yeah. Let's get over to
yeah,
number
but then,
7.
yeah.
25% got it. I was wondering that too, that's very low.
Yeah, very low.
Which definition matches the
It's
needs
a
of the
dictionary question, that's the thing, they don't know how to use the dictionary.
Mine do.
Which definition best matches the meaning of the word
Yes, it is one of my
surmounting
stations.
as it is used in paragraph 10?
They're not looking at the definition and comparing it to the paragraph maybe.
You're
I
right.
think that's what's happening.
That is,
Yeah.
or they're seeing the
It's
first
being
little tiny
used.
thing that the dictionary says,
Yeah.
and they're not looking to see if
It's
it's
like
others.
partial reading again.
How many of y'all saw anybody use a dictionary?
I had them out.
I had a
She
couple.
said, I had them out.
I had a couple.
too.
I'm gonna tell you what, I had a kid yesterday go, what, this blue thing's a thesaurus? What is
Oh
it?"
my
I was like,
gosh.
he wasn't kidding. I
Oh,
was like, I
goodness.
don't wanna embarrass him.
My students use the dictionaries all the time.
But I'm telling you,
Well, my
Okay, Brandy and I are doing a
They're raising their
dictionary.
hand and asking for them.
We have a dictionary station set up for our station
I like
this
it, I
week,
might,
so.
I like that.
Handout.
Yeah, I like that.
But you know what, like mine today, cause I'm not face up,
but they need to go
They
back
already
to
know
something
now.
and apply it.
they just go
That's
get the
right.
dictionary, they know they don't have to ask me, so at least
Yeah.
some of them, not
Yeah.
all of them, are starting to get the
Well, and I
dictionary.
think,
Yeah, my kids use them.
I think Ms. Winsett hit the nail on the head in the sense of
Glossary.
some students may know what they think surmounting means, so they looked and figured out which one that's what I know it to mean, and they picked
They
the
think it's
answer,
connotation
not what
versus
it
the
meant,
denotation.
what in the actual story. So
Yeah.
again, it's that lack of
Plus, they
going
didn't know
back.
what the word ascend meant.
They
I
also,
That's the other thing,
yes.
Well, I'm just saying.
I agree.
They,
There's a word in the definition, which I
That
told
they
them, that's
didn't
when you
know.
use the thesaurus.
exactly.
well, some of mine literally will have the dictionary open and they'll read, their hand will be up and I'll go over there and they will ask me what a word in the definition means.
They,
And
So
I'm
then
like,
what?
you already
That's
have the
what we're
dictionary
saying.
open.
and I'm gonna tell you something else, I saw this, they had to overcome something in their, an obstacle in their ECR that they had to write. So
Okay.
apparently they got it from here, the first definition
And
when they
then
wrote their,
used it to,
used it, like they had to overcome the obstacles of the way or
Okay.
something, and I was like, okay, I think I kinda see where you got that, but,
yeah.
yeah, it's just again, a reading skill of slowing down, I don't know,
Mhm.
slowing down and,
So coming back to just really the test taking skill. So
we
it's
need
not
some little
necessarily-
passages, words, and then, I don't know, something, yeah.
Something in smaller chunks.
Mhm.
Yeah. I like that, for sure.
Maybe that needs to be a station down the road.
This one's hard because
And they're
they're
applying it to
so
reading now.
similar. To overcome, to ascend, to place something above, to surpass, all of those things you can do it that way. You see,
Okay,
Right.
so let's look at it.
Right.
Yeah, let's look at it.
Yeah, that does make it hard.
a singular disadvantage of the sea lies in the fact that after successfully surmounting one wave, you discover there's another
And
behind
it could
it.
be to overcome.
You are
a wave,
overcoming it, cause you're
That's
going
what I
over.
thought too,
This
but
one's
that's not a very
hard.
good choice.
That's hard.
This one's hard.
Well, cause I could see, but I could see the overcoming it, but to triumph over it feels odd. That feels odd.
Well,
To
Like I wouldn't say
surpass,
that.
I would almost put 4.
To surpass, yeah.
I gotta read
Cause
it.
you're getting over it. Oh no. I didn't read it all, I just read that one paragraph.
Yeah, yeah.
That was hard.
I mean, I get why it's B
Y'all.
because after successfully getting to the top,
Yeah.
It comes down
But-
to what's the best, I think, too.
Look
but
at
that one's, I mean, to be honest with you,
that.
that'd be one like if it'd been on my own test and I'd gone back and looked at it, I'd have been like, you know what, I'm probably gonna give you credit for whichever one you picked because they all could work.
Yeah.
Right.
So, to me,
Is
that's
there a
it.
dictionary in Edugents right now? Now, I thought there was.
No.
No.
That I think so, that's why
I
mine
think
had to
there
be
was, I think.
There
was.
will be a dictionary on the STAR test,
They
but
put
I'm
it in there
not
this
sure
year. It
that
used to
y'all
not
are
be.
putting
It was on the
dictionaries
PSAT.
out.
But I think I saw one on, I said, oh, they got a dictionary in there now. I use that one or use these, cause we talked about that.
Yeah,
But used to they didn't have
I
it,
just,
so they had to use
just
the
getting the
book.
kids to try
Yeah.
on this stuff.
They don't want
they don't want to.
Cause it's too
That's
time consuming.
correct. Read it down.
That's
Yeah.
exactly it.
That's it.
So,
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I'm glad we got to the bottom of that one. And I think too, for something like dictionary, like that, it is what's the best. And that's where we talked in our last group, that's what gets kids. Because to decide what they're all good, but which is the best is tough. And that's a tough skill to teach.
Yeah.
I don't have a lot of perseverance, right, and to figure out the best answer.
Well, and I think too, because then that gets into the opinion of which one.
What I think's the best, might not be what you think's the
Mhm.
best, given my life experiences and what, yep, for sure. Let's take a look at number 11, 37%, and this
Okay,
one
so
was
this
one,
is
over it, but I don't think they understand.
We haven't done it enough, that's
No.
gonna take
It's
a
fine to
repetition,
move
just
on,
like what it
thanks.
needs, to keep talking about it every time you
You
see
think it's
it.
gonna be like one question?
No, it's never been tested in 10 years. I've read all of their tests. Parallelism has never been tested.
Okay.
The standard is tested, but
It's
the
that
standard
way.
is applied.
It's not gonna
They don't
ask
ask you about parallelism.
Okay.
I wouldn't be able to answer that question.
Okay, well, let's take,
They'll have to look up the
Let's
dictionary.
take a
What's
look at it.
parallel?
Yes, that's the thing. You gotta teach them those things. That they have those.
They know they've heard this, but I don't know if
similes.
they remembered.
They can look up compound
Yeah.
sentences. And
well, and I,
then
you know,
say-
honestly, so I
That's what
get
I
it,
told
but even when you read it, like some of them, yes, I know it's parallelism, but the way they're worded is awful.
Yeah.
So it's almost like,
It's too confusing, I know.
it's the way, the wording is off.
Which is a test taking skill too.
What's repeated here, what's the
Yes.
pattern?
Wait a minute,
Wait, what's the correct?
So the correct answer is.
No one knows.
The correct answer is D.
but isn't number, isn't
It's
A
it's
the
already
same?
using.
No, because she stuck the word for in
Four.
there.
So let's
And
look at
for
what's
all
different.
forms of
Yeah,
life.
you gotta see,
Let's
really,
look
you
at
gotta
what's
look
different.
closely, that's why I told them, you gotta see the
Primary.
pattern.
So-
They stuck that in there, it would have been the same. That's the only, that's the only place she changed it.
It's a primary resource for humans, fish,
Yeah.
and all forms of life. So you've got four
Schooled me.
Now, you also, they're doing this digital, so
as
this
well
flipping
as
around
it's tough.
is tough for them.
Yeah.
They don't have
And
anything on
then-
paper anymore, half the time.
And all forms of what was the oh, and we threw in an extra and on C.
Yeah, I mean, are they gonna do
Which I
that?
think surely, so when you look at their answer choices, they were at least able to eliminate C, cause that sounds dumb, right? They could read that and say, it's the primary resource for humans and fish and all forms of life, and no, okay, that sounds odd.
And B, they just moved the word for,
Mm-hmm, because right up there.
so, I mean.
And when they added, they threw in as well as.
Right.
Yeah.
You could get rid of that,
Mm-hmm.
but again,
That's
it's,
tricky.
it's gonna be a
That's
matter.
I didn't like that at all when I
Yeah,
saw it, I was like,
that's
we're not gonna be able to see
tricky.
anything when
I
we talk
also
about
don't know how
that.
to teach semicolons.
And I,
don't know
Subject verb,
semicolons.
civic
To me, it would've been better to have
I don't know semicolons.
four
It's just
humans,
like
four
common
fish, and
family.
four all, and
You
four
can
all
say
forms of
common
life, I
family
couldn't
out,
see the
and
pattern
present.
anymore, cause it is technically kind of.
It was on the test like twice
Yeah, they
last
should,
year.
they would, you would
Yeah.
think so, because they could see the
I don't
repetition.
know.
The repetition, the pattern, yeah.
I don't
well,
know.
and that was, we talked about, so thing one, the word effective.
Semicolon,
So,
subject verb.
You know,
Except these
A,
sentences have to
although it
be
sounds
related.
odd a little bit for four
So
to
it
be
says,
there, is it
I
wrong?
hate
No,
pizza.
yeah.
It's grammatically correct.
Not with any, like, in terms of, especially being in the beginning of the year, if they done something where they could have seen the pattern and repetition would have been better.
Jonathan wants to get some.
This is hard to do on a screen,
Having
Yeah, and then, like you said, they're trying to go
semicolon
back to it.
and they get flustered and they.
So you're gonna
forget.
say, I hate pizza,
Okay.
I love
So
chicken.
what can't, so I know Joy's saying there's no way they're gonna test it like this.
No, they're not gonna test it like that.
But
They'll test
if we
plot.
were going-
Plot will be tested.
Let's say ifs.
Yeah.
If we were going to spiral it back in, just to make sure, cause who knows, there's a first time for everything, what could we do? What are some things, how can we spiral this skill in?
You just do some warm-ups, you do
You
some
just gotta
things
start
in
reading
Harvard,
writers.
you do some things in
Samples.
quizzes. I mean,
Sample sentences, or when they write something parallel, try to, maybe the group teacher.
For a
takes
while, I
it.
think like definitely showing them more and more examples so that they can
This-
start picking it up.
This started
because they're
coming
not
up more
picking it
last year with HMH though, when they started doing these
So we
HMH
can give them
tests, parallelism started coming up, we're like,
They're gonna ask you why, like what, they're gonna ask you why are they doing the plot like this, right? And
Mhm.
what
Sure.
what
There's purpose
parallelism
stuff.
is, yeah.
And
Or craft.
honestly, when I read this, yes, it's parallelism, that's what we're doing, but really this feels more like a grammar lesson, like which one is written the best. It
It's
doesn't
a
even
horrible
feel
question.
it is not.
like it's,
Yeah,
But wait, so when you're doing the plot stations, cause I know several of y'all had a plot station, at the end, like you reinforce that and you get them closer to star by saying, why was this plot effective? How did it communicate the conflict? What impact did it have on the conflict? Like those questions are what get you closer to what y'all actually
Yeah.
said.
yeah.
I would agree with that, so good suggestion. Okay, let's take a quick look at 12. We were at 43% on 12.
that's just a grammar mistake,
It
that's
is
just
a grammar.
semicolon versus colon.
For like-
So we were having a lesson over here.
These are the best ones because it's not subjective. It's right or it's,
It's
wrong.
right or it's
You can't
wrong.
argue it. That's why I like teaching writing and grammar.
The great Pacific Garbage Patch.
So correct answer was C, change semicolon to colon. And we had a heck of a lot of kids choose D, no change should be made, which, come on people. I'm sure you are telling your kids, that's rarely the
This
answer.
rarely is.
It's
It's
They have to
That's on the list.
listen when we tell them that.
It was on number 11.
And then you almost don't wanna say it, cause as soon as you say it,
It's gonna be an
3 of them are
answer,
gonna be.
yeah, no, I know.
They gotta know the use of a colon.
That's
Yeah.
exactly what I was gonna say.
Understand that.
That's the
Instead of a
thing, is
colon.
colon. They don't, they barely understand the comma right
It is a
now.
colon. I'm not looking at the
So-
wrong.
They're still putting their commas after their fanboys.
Or there's some of them, not all of them, there's some still trying to stick it before the subordinating conjunction and
Yeah.
the dependent, so we're still working on that.
Still working
Yeah.
on that.
Yeah, so I think if you were to, if the question was specific to commas, you would have a lot higher likelihood of correcting it. So possibly the semicolon, possibly. I just don't think they don't know, they don't know
colons yet,
when.
cause they're still getting semicolons and colons now.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. So how are you guys currently addressing, grammar?
Bell ringers.
Bell ringers? And then kind of whole groups
And
of
review.
them?
There's some stations.
And in stations, we're gonna have
Yeah.
complex sentences in our stations
Okay.
this Thursday,
we have-
Friday also.
We've been doing stations with it.
Okay.
But we've also been doing sentence types, and that should alleviate that, because you only use a semicolon when you're combining 2 sentences together.
And what do you, 2 things you need to make a complete sentence?
Subject verb, subject verb.
Subject verb.
So, okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
get
so what
that
else
down.
has to be true for you to use a semicolon?
well, the two sentences,
have to
they
be
know that they have to make
They
subject
have to
sense
be
together.
related, it has
Yeah.
to make sense.
What?
They
They
have
have
to
to be
make
related?
subject sense together, but you don't need
What
to
if
be
I'm
able to
talking
say the
about-
and.
Yes, they gotta be related. 2 subjects, 2 verbs. Very good. And then the last question that they did, you know, a little lower than we would anticipate was 13. 60% got it right, choosing B. So let's take a quick look at 13.
It's parallelism again.
At least they got higher on that one.
2.
Yeah, they did do better on that one.
Yeah.
Hey, we're lucky to get 6 of them.
Change root to from. So, so do you feel like, is there, if there is a question like that, is there a test taking tip that we could use for them, give them, to answer this kind of question?
Not a test taking too.
So like change through to by, change.
I say,
you
always
do
wanna
the-
say it out loud.
Like do the,
Yeah.
you transpose it, that's what I'm
Yes,
saying.
Whisper
Yeah.
it all to yourself.
Yeah, so I'm gonna go
I'm loving that
to
one, say it in your head, get that voice in your head.
Through to by.
So I'm gonna go to
through
13.
from, through
These
to
items
from.
come from offshore oil roads dumping rubbish and by shipping containers that fall off cargo ships. Like, so you do the find and replace method.
I would do that first,
Yeah.
just to see if it sounds right, and then
Correct.
mark it off.
And so that's my thought with test taking tip, the find and replace, right?
And through, and because of container, it ain't that one.
Right, that one.
Yeah.
So, one of the conversations we had previously, especially with some of these grammar pieces, dealt with, yeah, it's 27, but it's a, yeah.
It's a text that's a combining, which they're still
Uh-huh.
struggling with that, cause they're putting complex in there or whatever they're telling them,
Yeah.
what kind of sense to make.
Yeah. How do you feel like our students' everyday language is impacting their ability to answer some of these grammatical questions?
Huge.
So how do we combat that?
It's hard because of social media and the music they listen to, because they're writing the way they speak and what they hear. And what they see on all these sites that are so grammatically incorrect, it makes me wanna throw up, but that's what they're seeing out every single day.
So they're seeing it every day, what do we do?
They're
When
seeing
they
it
walk
like
in,
all
let's put their
moms and they're-
passwords in their phone so many times it locks it for the whole day.
Yeah, but seriously, but you're right,
There
like
you
they're
go.
seeing it wrong so
You
much
learn.
that it's like there's a wall that we can't get through. Like, I have a poster in my room that says, I see, period, I saw, period, I've seen, period, but never I seen. And I kid you not, in the last like 3 weeks, I've had like 7 kids go, what does that mean, why is that wrong?
I've seen it.
Okay, but the problem's there, so what do we do?
So when, sorry, I
What's
think
the
I'm
sad,
talking
no,
all
but
night.
what's the sad state is, we beat, the district on every one of these that were low.
Yes, yeah. It is interesting
That's
to look at,
terrible,
yeah,
I
even
mean-
our low areas are still higher than,
Yeah.
yeah,
terrible.
But we're low.
but we're low, it's low.
One of the things that I think I saw a shift with a few years ago is that, and we can all do it, a lot of times we can look at a sentence and we know it's grammatically correct or incorrect because we've read so much, it's become second nature, and that's why we don't know how to teach the rules, because it's second nature, because we read so much, right? So that's gone away, and so we're seeing the shift where they're not getting it second nature because they text different, they don't read anymore. And that's why I say you have to teach the skills explicitly with the parts of speech, right? And that's why they can't look at 4 sentences that are similar anymore and see where that comma moved at if they can't tell you what part of the sentence and why,
It's
right?
almost
It's like teaching them why.
It is teaching the why, and we've even lost the ability, you know, we read it, we know that when there's a comma or a period,
And
it's an
there's
extra
a break
pause,
there.
and but it's like, because of social media and the way we text and the way we talk and like we talk. Okay, so you might go back, what do? We gotta do something, what do?
What did English one say?
We have to correct them when they're speaking.
Yeah, we do.
I do it all the
I
time.
do too.
Let them
And they
recognize.
think it's funny, especially when I repeat what they say.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I ignore them, and I'll be like, next time, you know, like, oh, I'm sorry, I was waiting for you to say that correctly, and then I'll be respond. And they'll look at me, and then we have a whole little thing about what they just said and why it was wrong.
Yeah, it's not their fault, they're
Read more.
growing up and.
I just took them to the library last week.
Yeah, for sure.
Whether they're actually gonna read it though or not,
How do you fix all that?
Yeah. And I think that's the $1 million question,
Yeah.
because I think that's a lot of what they're struggling with, comes back to that.
yeah, like, I took mine to the library so that we can read, just like you do. They can't do me they're actually reading the book.
Right.
I told them they're fake reading. They're not, you're just looking down like you're looking, like you're reading, but you're
But I
not.
mean,
You know, even with capitalization, they're still not capitalizing the beginning of the
No.
sentence. I'm like, we said this at the
Yeah,
beginning.
that's
Wild.
weird.
They're just typing whatever, they're not even putting a period,
They're
they're
they do
putting
not
it
capitalize
says
the first
capitalize
word of
I.
any sentence, and it's about to,
It's almost
about
like
to
basic
do the end.
capitalization, we've got.
That's
And
because
I-
when they text, they changed it
Oh.
on their phone to everything's lowercase. so it
Everything's
doesn't
okay now,
automatically
yeah, they
auto
should have.
that.
Yeah, but they don't capitalize I.
I had a whole adult email me earlier
She said
about her
whole
class at UT
adult.
Tyler, and everything was lowercase.
Okay,
I
that
was
works
like,
out.
I'll respond to you whenever you can capitalize your I and use grammar.
Well, I'm like, the I in the first word of a sentence, I mean, come on.
That is wild.
So I think that's probably the, leave you with today would be, how do we address that? And I don't know the
I know,
answer,
I don't.
but
It's
English
like-
1 didn't have a great answer.
If we
either.
had
I
the
think we're all
answer,
in that
we
same-
would already be doing
It
it.
stresses you out, if you think about it, you can't fix it all.
I told you the answer, teach them the parts of speech.
Yes.
Well,
But
I
we've
guess
been
so.
doing
We're
that
gonna teach
too.
the same parts
Answer.
of speech yeah.
That could be some of it, it can help.
Yeah, but even though we've been doing some of that, they still go back to the.
It's like they do it when they're with us,
Yeah.
they know, but then when they're typing something on their own, they're going back to their old
Yeah,
habits.
so you see they've got it, and then you get like this
So
test
unless
back online, and you're like,
Send it all back to him, or go, here you go, 0, you redo it, I mean, I
you
guess.
just typed in this whole SCR with no capitalization, no punctuation.
And you use the chat GPT on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, we're
true,
doing
we know
that
they
for
use
sure.
chat GPT on that one.
Yeah. Well, thank you
So
for your
in-
time. Yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
in the spring, we're only gonna have a benchmark. We're gonna do this last one in December, and then they're gonna do benchmark, and that'll be the data we'll look at after, okay? I guess they had that planned all year. I thought they took some away, but they had it all.
I'm not really sure, everybody else is still doing unit assessments, but from what I understand, English unit assessments are